Welcome to So Many Questions, the podcast where curiosity meets leadership. Join host Rebecca Goodman-Stephens, CEO of law firm Moses Singer, as she sits down with bold thinkers and thought leaders to discuss what motivates and drives their leadership styles and decisions. From candid stories to aha moments, we go behind the scenes to find out what really drives them. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the So Many Questions podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Goodman-Stephens, the CEO of Moses and Singer. And I'm very excited today to be with Daniel Curtis, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at emc3. So welcome, Daniel. Nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. And I have so many questions for you today, so we can get straight into it.
Let's go.
Tell me a little bit about your journey and what took you to where you are today in this role at this company.
So my journey was not a straight line, as most people, I think, experience. I started off as a philosophy major, went to university to study philosophy because I was fascinated by it and I always wanted to do something interesting rather than maybe useful. My parents weren't too pleased.
I could see
graduated
that.
and again, wasn't entirely sure what to do. Wanted to do something I loved, so decided to become a chef and ended up training in kitchens and getting my NVQs in Leeds in the north of England. And I spent 4 or 5 mostly happy years as a chef in restaurants, and then evolved from there into event catering and found my way into the events world. And so 20-something years ago, I stepped out of the kitchen and for a temporary period decided to start doing the front of house side of events and kind of went from there.
I love that story. And I think although some stories are linear, I think the more people I meet nowadays who have really interesting roles tend to have different kind of backgrounds with, philosophy.
I don't understand how someone at 18 knows what to do with their life. I think you have to find your way.
I think it's very difficult and it's nearly impossible to say to someone at that age, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think a lot of those skills can build into who you ultimately become. And I like to think we're never fully finished either. So hopefully we have a long ways to go.
With that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people I know who maybe are very successful but aren't particularly happy took a job that was the right job. You know, it was the job that would get them to the money they wanted or the status they wanted, but didn't necessarily have the daily pleasure of doing what they do. That I think is necessary.
I think that's super important. And I love that you bring that up earlier. You were kind of saying that it's not, it wasn't a useful skill, maybe the philosophy aspect, but I'm curious to see if there's something that you learned from that you now see as maybe actually useful to you.
So I'll clarify. I think philosophy should be on everyone's radar.
Mandatory.
Absolutely. I think at a young age, kids should learn about the study of life. And philosophy is basically studying life.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be in society? What does it mean to love art or to understand language or to be in a political environment? And it's not seen like that in schools these days. So I think it is essential. I do think it's very important. It's just quite hard to parlay it into a job.
Yes.
Unless you're going to become a journalist or a writer or some kind of academic.
Right.
There's no philosopher jobs going right now.
Generally not. Yeah.
No, maybe on social media.
Yeah, more influencer.
But it's funny that I think many, many years ago, philosophy was the only thing that was taught. Before the Renaissance, philosophy was the course. And it kind of disappeared. All the bits that came under it, science and art, became their own subjects. So philosophy became something niche.
It became like an afterthought. It's really funny as you're speaking because it was actually philosophy that led me to want to do what I did.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which to become a clinical psychologist, because by studying philosophy at school, and it was mandatory where I went to school in France.
Oh, wow.
And it was a mandatory subject to kind of pass your equivalent of the GCSEs. And by learning philosophy and getting exposed to Freud at the time, and his work was what made me want to become a clinical psychologist and go into that field. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I do love that. And it also reminds me of something recently that I heard when we're thinking about the future of skills that you need in the workforce and what we should tell our kids to focus on and what the next generation should focus on. A lot of the tech leaders are actually telling their kids, no tech in the house, focus on history, art, and philosophy, going back to those roots. So it's really interesting. That or the trades is kind of what I'm hearing in terms of a big discussion right now.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the world we live in changes so much, and now it seems to have accelerated even more. It's every single year there's a new thing that we're going, what does that mean? What does that mean for society? What does that mean for people? Unless you look back and sort of think about where we've come from and how we've ended up where we are, it's very hard to project forward and understand what the risks are and understand how to mitigate them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all of us before the phone had no idea the impact social media and telephones would have. But when you kind of think about it in the context of how it's changed how we interact as a society, you can tell there's going to be some problems. You can see, maybe there's some things we need to put in place.
Yeah, and I can see that even in the feed of what I'm getting now. A lot of the products that they're looking to push are actually how to step away from social media, how to step away from your phone. The phone boxes, or
isn't that funny? There's
which is really funny. It's ironic.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic in a way, but it's interesting times to be in.
I think with AI, it's another new thing that people are much quicker at understanding. Let's not just go full speed ahead. There is a risk here.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the experience of the internet and then the experience of telephones.
Yeah, how to manage that and kind of navigate that. Yeah. Going back to the chef days, because I'm super intrigued about that. What did you learn from the kitchens at, I think it was Hotel Malmaison that you were in?
Malmaison started.
What did you learn there that you think has really been a good life skill that you've taken with you? Because I'm sure there are loads of things.
I think I learned some humility. I went into it as a 21-year-old graduate who'd traveled a bit and, come from a reasonable background of education. And a lot of the people I was working with were 16-year-olds who had literally been told, you can be a plumber, an electrician, or a chef. Those are your three options for your next steps. So they didn't love what they did necessarily. They grew to be amazing chefs and to love what they did. But they came at it as a job. And I was doing it because, well, this sounds fun. We'll give it a go. And it was hard work, and you put in the hours, and you really have to be dedicated and focused to get where you want to go with it. I think the other thing is you're working in an environment with people from all over the world, all different levels of education, all different responsibilities, as well as customers who have high expectations, and it's balancing those relationships and understanding how to sort of live in all those different areas.
I think it's a really important skill, especially now. I mean, you're in a global company. A lot of our business is de facto global anyway, given how the world is going. I could see that being a really important skill to have.
And you can see when, I love it when I see a CV that has either service or chefs on it.
Take notes, guys, if you're applying for emc3. Yes.
There we go. So, first of all, they know how to work hard. They're going to put in the shift, put in the hours. And secondly, they know about service. And, being hospitable and looking after people and thinking about your customer as opposed to just a product.
Yeah.
And, nothing wrong with people who are very product focused, but you've got to think about who you're serving.
Such an important piece. And I think in hospitality, similar to kind of the space that I'm in, oftentimes we lose sight of that. I don't know if you guys, but we lose sight of, what does the client really need and how do we stay ahead of that? I'm curious, what would you say is good service? Like what does that look like? What does that feel like?
Not forced. That someone's doing it because they want to do it.
Yeah.
If someone's serving you and you can see that, it's almost like a gun to their head that they're having to do this, it's not a good experience. Whereas if someone genuinely wants you to have a good time or to experience something or to feel joy or to learn, that service. They're really looking after you and thinking about you. And you can tell. I mean, you know when you can see a waiter who's there going, I'm putting myself through school or this is my second job, as opposed to someone who really cares about serving.
Yeah, that's really true. And actually I had a recent experience that I've no kickback on this whatsoever, but I had a really good experience at the Montage Hotel that made me feel that way, where it was very much tailored and you could tell that the employees there actually enjoyed doing what they do and that they were treated well. And I could see all of the kind of the cascade of those repercussions on how it would impact client service. So
and it
that
all comes
resonates.
From culture.
It does.
You can get the odd person who's just great at it. But if you set up a company with a culture of service, of gratitude, of supporting each other, that trickles down to the customer.
For sure. And that's a perfect transition to a question I really wanted to ask you actually about your values, because what I love about your values are they really are not off the shelf, kind of the typical canned values that you have on a wall. I know you don't have a wall, and that's maybe why.
True.
But can you tell me a little bit about the values? And you came to 3, I think you used to have 4, and then you went down to 3, and I love it.
We, for many, many years ago, we read a piece that was done by the CEO of HubSpot about building a company with culture. Yeah. And it was one of those sort of moments of aha that you went, what, we really need to focus more on our culture. We're doing a great job, but we're not really culture centric.
Right.
So we started working on what our culture was, and how do we develop our culture, and what are the things that we like to do, and how do we want to interact with people. This led up to us running a workshop for our team, and I think it was about 8 or 10 people in the workshop. And we had an external moderator who came in, and we went through a whole process of really digging into who we were and who we wanted to be, and how we wanted to approach business. This was distilled down brilliantly by a copywriter who was working on our team into, at the time, 4 core values. So the first core value was to be conscious operators. And what this means is to really be thoughtful about how we work. It talks to sustainability.
Yeah.
It talks to consideration of others. And that's the one that kind of is how we want to be as people.
Yeah.
The second of them was to be dependable forces. So,
love that one.
you've got to be reliable. You've got to have people who come to you and they know you're going to do what you say.
Yeah.
And also you're going to be there for each other again. You're going to step up when you need to step up.
Mm-hmm.
The third was to be fearlessly imaginative. That's the one which, throughout the company, I think people sometimes find a bit of a challenge because there's a risk element to it.
Yeah.
It's about taking those risks and being a little bit creative in how you answer a problem or solve a challenge for a client, and to always keep pushing. If a client comes to us and says, we want to do the same event every year, it might not be for the client for us.
Yeah.
But if we keep pushing them a little bit, just a little incremental changes, you'll see the benefits. And the fourth one, which we no longer have, was until it shines, which at a point felt right, because it was really about polishing and nurturing and making sure that things were really great.
So
It fell into hesitation around perfection.
Yeah. I call that kind of perfection paralysis, where it just becomes,
that was it.
80% is generally good enough. Obviously, if it's a very technical topic, it's not. Yeah. But for most things, we kind of then
in events, you have a deadline. You've got to get that event done, and you can't push it back a week.
Yeah.
So you can't just wait for it to be perfect. You have to make it great.
Well, you could also, I could imagine, lose sight of what you're really trying to achieve if you focus on perfection, because the execution sometimes isn't perfect in an event, just even from our perspective of doing corporate events. But it still achieved the goal that you're trying to achieve, even if the speaker didn't come out exactly on the spot that you wanted, or the video didn't show exactly what you wanted it to show. It really still achieved what you were trying to achieve.
And I think you've got to remember that no one out there knows the detail of what you were trying to do. They just want to have the experience or the feeling. I think also for the character, the type of personalities that we find in events, very often either super detail orientated, and they're great project directors, they're great at managing timelines and getting things done, or very creative. And
nowhere in between.
You can have people like that, but I think that's quite rare.
Yeah.
In my world, at least.
Yeah,
And
I could see that.
It's hard to ask both of them to work for perfection when one has got this beautiful conceptual idea and the other one has got here's the detail, we've got to get all this done.
And I could see how they could potentially, those two groups of people might disagree on what perfection actually means to them. So you might even have a disconnect there. But I love that you then decided to get rid of that value and just be more practical in terms of what it looks like.
We rework them regularly, and our values are what our culture's built on.
Yeah.
I think culture without values is just the things you do. It just is about we have drinks on a Friday, or we celebrate birthdays. Yeah. That's not culture. That's the effects of it.
Yeah. So being really intentional on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think your values can shift. I think the core values will remain, but sometimes you need to look at them and say, are they as relevant as they used to be?
Yeah.
Your culture will constantly change.
Yeah.
If you're hiring 20% more people, you can't have the same culture as before.
No,
or if you're acquiring a company, even more so.
Yeah.
But it has to fit within the values.
Do you have non-negotiables that you wouldn't evolve? Or you feel like that's like a hard, that's a value that
there are behaviors.
Behaviors, right?
Like, for example, when we onboard someone, we will, myself and my business partner, Alistair, will spend 45 minutes and we'll go through the history of the company. We'll talk about our values, our mission, our vision, our culture. And we have a slide in this deck, which is the behaviors which are acceptable and not acceptable. And some things like gossiping or trying to climb over other people to succeed.
I want that slide.
I'll absolutely share it with you.
Yeah.
Those are things which are they don't work for us.
Yeah.
If someone comes into the company and is happy to succeed at the expense of other people, in the long run, it's not going to work. It's
not going to work for them. It's not going to work for anyone. Yeah.
Well, it might work for them in the short term, but not with us. And that's not going to be our way to go. And there's also positive things, just celebrating others and being there for them and not working in silos, but actually sort of coming together and supporting each other, which that's always going to be how we are, to the extent that I think there's probably a cap on how much we could grow, because some of these things are really impossible to do when you're at 1,000-person scale.
Yeah, you'd have to have middle management teams that are exceptionally kind of well-versed in this and have the same vision and would implement that.
I'm sure it's doable,
difficult.
but I just don't think in my lifetime my company's going to be able to do that sustainably.
Scale it, yeah.
You look at these massive companies who have the best intentions, and there's so many toxic behaviors within them.
And it doesn't necessarily, the execution is tough on that.
And they don't mean it to be that way. It's just, it evolves. It goes that way.
Yeah, no, I could see that. In terms of the value around being fearlessly imaginative.
Fiercely might be good as well, though.
Fiercely is a good word too, yeah. But fearlessly, how do you create an environment? Because it feels to me like you'd need to have a very safe environment for people to really be fully bring up the craziest ideas and new ways of thinking about things. How do you intentionally do that? Like what do you do to try to get that type of environment in place?
I think there's a couple of main things to that. We need to get better at this. We always need to get better at this, but giving good feedback.
Yeah.
That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges in a business is to give good, honest feedback to people where they don't feel judged, but they do feel seen. And you're able to say to them, next time I think maybe do this or that, without them thinking it's a black mark against them. And they're just going to not want to take a risk next time. But the other thing is just, trying things. As a company, we will quite happily as leadership say, you know what, we tried it and it didn't work. And it's happened many, many times, but we've got to put our hands up.
Yeah.
You've got to take responsibility for it. And I think that coming from the top down, for us to show our fallibility is important. There was a kickoff we had this is many years ago now. And 4 of us from leadership stood up and told the team about our biggest mistake ever.
What was it?
My one was I sent a budget to a client with all of our internal pricing and
conversation,
everything. It had everything in it to show what our profit was, what we did. And it was just too much, not something that was client friendly. Fortunately, the client didn't open the email or read it. Yes. But it was a lesson. It was just about taking time and having a process to make sure that couldn't happen. And we changed our systems on the back of that. But I think it's important.
That's good. You show that you're always learning, and it's not shaming. It's just more,
And it's going to happen. No one's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes.
Except for us, obviously. But yes.
Well, I would say, I haven't known you long enough, but I'm sure there's something.
Oh, there's a lot. I have a lot to work on. I'm completely joking. I'm a big fan of continuous improvement, and I find that actually gives me a lot of hope and is a really refreshing thought that I'm going to be a better person in a year than I was the year before. I think that's being able to keep growing and learning is a huge.
And I think as a leader, identifying people who are better at what you do than you are, and then letting them do that.
100%.
And stepping out of their way and saying, you got this.
Yeah, 100%.
Gives them that confidence.
No, I think that's really important. And I think, that's why I was asking you questions about, how you create that environment. I'm a large, I really like as a leader setting the tone with we're trying things out. I think it allows people to experiment, to take risks. They see us doing it. We're modeling that behavior. And I also think it's important to own our mistakes too, like you were saying. Obviously, you're not going to make the same mistake 3 times. That's kind of where I draw the line. But if you're making a mistake and you adapt to that and correct a process and do better afterwards, I think that's amazing.
Certainly in the last year, I've come up with a couple of ideas that, for me were great possibility, great potential. And the team have looked at me and gone, that's not a good idea. And maybe I pushed it a little bit and then they've been proven right. And I've gone, you know what, you were right on that.
Well, the fact that they feel safe saying that to you is already a KPI that I look at. Like if people are comfortable calling me out and saying, I don't think this is a great idea, I feel like I've done a good job this year because I've created an environment.
But I also want to push back to say to them, you know what, it's a risky idea.
Yeah.
But my tolerance and your tolerance may not be the same, and we'll figure out something that works for the company. And I think if everyone constantly comes at ideas from the point of view of, but what about this? And that's a problem. Then you don't grow and you don't do that exciting stuff. And I do think that's a cultural thing. I was having a conversation with someone about this. British people, I would say, tend to come at it from looking at what's the potential risk? What are the problems?
Yeah.
What I find in New York particularly is people say, that's amazing. And what about this? And we could do that. And then you'll come back round to maybe, well, let's also mitigate a little bit.
Yeah.
But that openness is important.
I think it is. And I know you like hats, so I'll give you my hat example. I often like to play a game with the team, or just in general, even with myself, where I say, let's put on the critiques hat, the Englishman's hat, let's call it that. Then
Sure.
we're kind of finding all the risks and like what could go wrong as a team, so it doesn't become like a personal thing. And then put on the, well, what amazing thing could happen or could come out of this if we did do this, right? And kind of put different hats on, so we're looking at it from different perspectives.
That's a great idea.
I think it's really important, because then it becomes not a personal thing. It's more of like, as a team, let's work at looking at this at different angles. So
my business partner and I have been working together for 20 plus years, and I know how he will come at it and he knows how I'll come at it. So we can see that already.
Yeah.
Our leadership team, some of them have been with us quite a long time, but some are newer. Understanding how they approach these challenges is so important.
yeah,
Knowing that our finance team are going to, first of all, look at costs and risks on that side.
and they're doing their job, right? That's 100%. What they have to do.
But if you can come to that conversation having already considered the fact that they're not going to see it your way,
then
I think that moves you forward quite a lot.
I like that nuance, though, that you brought up of, it's good. Like I was saying, it's good that they called you out, but I like your point that also sometimes you have to push through and say, well, maybe you're not seeing it the same way I am. And there's a reason you're the chief strategy officer, right? It's to really push through some of those riskier ideas that might end up being a game changer.
And that's also the reason why I'm not the CEO, because someone is going to stop me if I'm going too far.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, part of the fun of it.
Yeah, no, I love that. What's the craziest or most riskiest idea that you've done recently that really worked out?
Wow.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Just a little
Daniel.
bit.
Yeah.
Riskiest idea that I'm moving to New York. I mean, I relocated here a year and a half ago.
I guess.
It was. I mean, I relocated my whole family here. There was a number of reasons why we did it. I mean, for one, the majority of our business is in the US. So coming over here showed willing. It showed that the team who were over here, and we got, a third of our team was in the US without someone from leadership. And also a lot of our clients were, saying, well, why are we getting a UK company to do our big events in, America?
Resonates more with the market,
But from a personal point of view, it's, in my 40s to relocate my whole family and to come over here was a risk, which is what definitely worked out so far. But it was also something that I think opened up people's eyes in the company to the possibility. We've got 2 or 3 other people who are potentially coming next year.
Nice.
And I think they're seeing that, the company will support you if you want to try this out.
That there's more mobility and you could try out different things.
And one of the great things about being remote is that we've got people in our team one of our team went to Jamaica for 6 months to work from there, and she'd always wanted to go there because her family was originally from there. And so she worked her same day, but just from somewhere else. Another of our team has done the same 2 or 3 times over the year.
And why not, right? There's no longer those limits in terms of where we have
and
to
the
be
risk
physically.
is, the risk is that, they're not able to do the job properly, but if we set it up properly and they are great, if they aren't, then we'll have a look at another look at it,
No, I love that. And it'll be interesting to see how long your accent lasts, because I've become
How long have you been here?
I've been here for 14 years. Okay. And I think at times I sound Australian now. So
bit.
You'll have to,
A little bit.
So you'll see what happens. It happens to the best of us.
I'm holding on to it. And my daughter's
because your wife
recently,
your daughter, she's Brazilian though, right?
My wife's Brazilian, but her accent's very British. And my daughter is at school now here. She's 11. Obviously, there's little bits that are coming in.
Yeah, see how long it lasts. But
She's
it's a slippery slope.
Exactly.
But it's a game changer to get things done in New York for sure, with having the accent.
Yeah,
I feel
when we
it's
first came
a
over
gate
here
opener.
15 years ago, we really hammed it up.
Yeah.
I'd wear like a waistcoat, a vest.
Like a little pocket. Yeah.
Hat, the whole
Englishman
thing.
in New
Very
York.
strong English accent.
Yeah.
And you walk into rooms and people go, this guy's educated.
Yeah. You're like, no, it's just an accent, but we'll keep that facade going.
Got us through the door.
Yes. Another thing I wanted to ask you, when we spoke about, preparing for this, I really loved the concept of that you put in place in your life and in your career to kind of reinvent yourself and kind of fire yourself or get yourself get yourself out of a role to promote others and to keep that going and stay relevant, and kind of a healthy level of, I won't say anxiety around it, but that's me projecting, but, a healthy level of not wanting to no longer be relevant and continuing to think 10 steps ahead. Can you walk me through some examples of that and kind of how you're thinking about that now?
So when we started the company, or when I joined the company, it's already been going a little bit, everyone did everything. When you're a small company of a few people, you don't have very defined roles. You just get the job done.
Yeah.
So we all kind of did the same thing. Over time, we kind of went our different ways and people had different skill sets. And there was a point in time about 10 years ago where we really started to define the roles within the company. So my business partner was the CEO, I was the COO, and I was not a chief operating officer. It was not my skill set, but it was just a title that was senior enough and meant that I could carry on doing what I was doing. Then as we've grown and as we've built real structure within the business, we've needed to have people who are really good at those jobs in those roles. And the first time this happened was in about 2017, 18. One of our team, who was our director of operations at the time, came to me during her review. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to get to? And she said, I want your job.
I love that.
And I was like, oh. And I had a
mildly
minute.
offended,
I
but
was kind of
excited.
like, okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'd never really considered it too much. But
I
as I thought about it, I just thought, she's going to be so much better at this than me. And I was the MD at the time. And over the next year or so...
She knew that too. She was like, yeah, I'm going to nail this job. Yeah.
I mean, she was doing my job to some extent.
Yeah.
And I was doing what I do. But she, over the next couple of years, got to the point where it just made sense. And I think it was around 2020, actually it was in the pandemic, where we were just like, this is right, this is the right time. And she took over the job and we made a big announcement about it. And I mean, she was, I think, 28, 29 at the time. So she was a young female MD taking over a position, leading a team. And it was just a fantastic thing to do. But when it happened, I just had this moment of like, well, who am I? It was that sort of existential fear, but it was quite fun. I really liked it. And I liked the idea of figuring out, what do I do next?
Did you share that with her at the time, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put a post out on LinkedIn about it
love that.
Just saying, and I actually said on the post, I'm going to replace myself every 3 years. And I've not quite done that, but this was, maybe 4 years ago. And I stepped into the chief strategy officer role, which was very close to what I did. And now that I'm over here in New York, I'm doing a bit more sales and a little bit more, a little bit less client strategy, a little bit more company strategy. But, there'll come a time, I'm not sure when it'll happen again. I'm kind of excited for it. And I like the idea of, not in reality because I'm in an office, but taking the nameplate off the door with the title and just having my name for a bit and then figuring out what that might be.
Yeah. No, I that really deeply resonated with me too, actually. And it's a strange feeling, at least when I went through that, because I've had that experience too. And you have to sit with that for a few minutes. And I found it helpful to share with the person in question so that when they have that experience themselves, they will push through it and do what they need to do to be sure that their team is developing. I just always had in my mind the whole concept of A players hire in A+ players, or develop A+ players, and B players bring in C players. So that helped me push through that awkward moment. But you have to be able to push through that feeling, right? Of who am I? Where am I going?
It's an interesting thing when you're either a founder or you're entrepreneurial and it's your business. So you're not going to, look for a job somewhere else where you can move up the ladder.
Yeah.
You need to make space for people.
Yes.
Because otherwise people are going to leave, and that's absolutely fine. A lot of people will hop jobs to move up and up and up, and that's great. If you want to keep the great people, you need to make space for them.
Yeah, that requires self-awareness and.
Well, it helps when you're an owner, because then you don't have that sort of, oh, well, I'm redundant. Well,
yes.
I've not got a job. But I think the important thing is, as we grow and as we evolve, to grow and evolve the structure and to bring through people who are just more experienced than us.
Yeah.
Myself and Alistair have never worked in another agency. So without them, we're just making it up.
Yeah.
Whereas they'll come in with 10, 20 years of experience in another agency and say, well, this is a structure that worked for us. This didn't. This compensation package works. That doesn't. And we can learn
benchmarks from other. Yeah, that's a really good point too.
Exactly. I do think that, looking at the next phase of the company, and this is an exciting one for us, there are some amazing people who are coming through who are going to, we're going to sit back and watch them do the things that we struggled with easily.
What do they say to you when they choose to come join, emc3? What's the reason for them?
It's generally culture.
Culture.
I mean, we are a very creative and fun agency to work for. We do incredible work with great clients all over the world, but we're also incredibly focused on culture. And that's, again, not that culture of, having the fun office with the perks.
Yeah.
It's about how the staff and the team work together. It's the interactions between them, and it's the way that we work with our clients.
So that makes it a competitive advantage too for you guys.
I think so. I mean, the other part, and I hadn't touched on this yet, but we're also a B Corp. And B Corp is, for those that don't know, it's a certification which really holds you to a higher level of expectancy about sustainability and about how you work with your team and the governance of the business. And we, have very proudly done that for a couple of years. We've been accredited.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal, but it's also, it limits some of the things you can do in a good way.
Yeah.
You can't work with certain types of industries and certain businesses, but you're also really saying, we're going to do our best to do good.
You're taking a stance, though, in terms of that's kind of putting your values, your money where your mouth is,
Exactly.
kind of,
And it's something that we, to the extent that we have an agency within the collective, the emc3 collective, that is a sustainability consultancy and works with companies to help them become B Corps.
Yeah, that's
which
great.
is, passing that on and helping others to do that.
Do you see your clients choosing you also for that reason? Because you do have
Some
that
have.
kind of sustainability and ethical, they do.
Some have. I mean, it's a difficult time at the moment. I think, politically, there's challenges around that. However, I do believe the generations who are coming through, it's important to them.
Yeah.
And as it should be.
I believe it is. I believe it is in terms of just purchasing anything, whether it's services or products. I still think it's at the
And
forefront.
when we look at RFPs, we often, in the past, we get an RFP and on page 35, it would say, and tell us about your sustainability credentials.
Yeah.
And now it's a little bit further forward and it's a bit more integrated.
That's a good sign.
And for us, it's not something that is an extra slide. It's thread through everything we do.
Yeah.
From our supply chain to the way that we work with venues and the way that we, deal with recycling, etc. These are things which are not just afterthoughts.
Yes, kind of it's the leitmotif to everything that you guys do.
And there are clients who say, well, you must be more expensive then. And maybe in certain areas we might be, but if they don't want to do that, they may not be the client for us.
Yeah. You've said that a few times in terms of they might not be the client for us and kind of knowing what the right fit is. What do you look for in a client and how do you assess if they are the right client and help them realize if you guys are the right service provider?
So we would look through our values, through the lens of our values, that we, like I said, we don't want to have a client that is just going to do 1,000 events a year, all the same. That's not us. There are great agencies who do that and there's nothing wrong with it, but we're not set up for that.
Yeah.
We want a client who is looking to grow, not necessarily in terms of size and numbers, but that is a great opportunity to do more stuff. But they're looking to grow as in do better and do more creative or strategically led events. And any client that is going to come to us and go, we're really excited to work with you and we have very clear objectives. We want to do this, we want to do that, is fantastic.
Dream client, yeah.
Yeah, but also a client that comes to us and goes, we know we need to do this, we don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
Awesome. As long as they're open for us to come in and work closely with them and figure it out.
How did you guys position yourselves that way? Because I know you said you're not just logistics, right? Because event planning could be everything from, doing an event and just doing the logistics side of things, but you're really dedicated to being a platform where clients can voice and achieve their objectives and voice their storytelling and really link to content. How did you guys position yourselves that way to get that type of client and to really achieve those types of events?
It's been a journey. We're currently, we would say we are a full service agency, which doesn't mean that we have all the means of production within our ownership, but we take responsibility for it all. So the risk is on us. If we're going to be doing an event, we will take responsibility for every single element, every vendor, everyone that comes through. It's taken a while to get there. We started off as a concierge many, many years ago.
I didn't know that.
This is right at the beginning where we were really helping people, with their social lives and getting into nightclubs and getting tickets and all this sort of thing.
Was that the lifestyle? There was a title I saw in
was
your
a
bio.
lifestyle enhancer.
That sounded like an amazing job, by the way.
It does sound like an amazing job.
It wasn't.
It's a big ask to enhance someone's lifestyle.
It is.
But that was where the kind of hospitality came from, is, really thinking about the individual experience. From there, we really became a logistics company. So we were very much about, hotels, bedrooms, making sure that everything works smoothly, but we didn't do creative production.
Okay, so you went through kind of different phases.
And then we started doing that. And so we learned that and we got better at that. And then we started doing the next thing. And so over time, we've sort of reversed into the full service elements.
Interesting.
And now we're very much strategy and content led. So we don't really do parties. We don't do events which are just a party event.
Strategic parties that doesn't sound that
well,
that
you
fun.
do that. We've got a client that has an IPO, so we'll do their party for them. Great.
That ties into a bigger holistic relationship.
There's a strategy behind the whole thing. But what we really focus on is storytelling and messaging. And it's a very key, it's kind of a catchphrase now to have storytellers. But it's why you do the event. You're telling a story to your staff for an internal event. You're telling a story to your customers or to your prospects. And the strategy behind that is the thing which really gets us excited, because there's hundreds of ways to do it.
I like that. And it's a lot more thoughtful. I imagine it pushes your clients too to think about, well, why are we doing this? What do we want people to feel and take away from this? And
What's the objective?
what's the objective? Yeah, the sense of purpose around it. And it must help too with decision making, I imagine. Because then you kind of go back to that objective.
That's the hope. I mean, we tend to start off our projects with a workshop with our executive team from our client side, the key stakeholders for the event. If we can get them all in a room and get them to agree why they're doing the event, then there's a pretty good chance that at the end of the event, they'll all agree if it was good or bad.
Yeah.
We've done events in the past where at the end of the event team are delighted and the CEO comes in and goes, what was that? That's not what because they weren't aligned. They didn't have that conversation about why they're spending a massive part of their marketing budget on an event. So there is that element of alignment, which is necessary.
Yeah.
And you do often as well, certainly in some of the fast-growing companies where you've got an executive team who are all very ambitious, have some friction between different people. Maybe the CMO and the CFO don't quite see eye to eye on the spend.
Oh, they definitely won't. No,
they may not,
the CFO and CMO.
They should be able to come to an understanding of the value of it.
Yes.
And that's kind of where we can come in as a third party. Yeah. And as someone who doesn't have skin in the game to their extent, but has got a full understanding of what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. No, that's really important in helping your clients kind of articulate what is valuable to them and from your perspective, with your experience.
Oftentimes reminding them about the customer.
Yeah.
If they're doing a customer event and they've got something they need to say, it's important they understand that the customers may not want to hear it, or that may not be the reason they're there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gets lost a little bit, and that audience piece is very key.
It kind of comes full circle to your whole point of, understanding your clients. Well, having your clients understand their clients is also part of that whole ecosystem. So
absolutely.
It seems super key. So you spoke about this evolution really going from concierge lifestyle enhancer. I love that title. And going through to focus on logistics and then more of a focus on where you really wanted to be in this niche of like strategy and content and storytelling. What's next for you guys in the next 12 months? What are you thinking about? And where do you see the vision of this going? What's the next new thing that's going to happen?
So I think one of the exciting things for us is the new verticals that we're looking at. We've been for many years focused on B2B and particularly the tech world. We've worked with some fantastic, big name clients in that tech space and learned, our trade through doing that. Just last summer, we acquired a B2C agency. So starting to work with consumer brands, and it's a slightly different animal, and it needs a little shift in how we're delivering. But again, it's stretching us, it's making us improve and get better. And in the new year, we're going to be looking at pharma and the life sciences as a vertical that we can really focus on. We've got a great experience within the team with some of our new team members, and so we're going to be launching that.
That's exciting.
It is exciting.
Ever-growing industry.
Again, and it's one of those ones where I don't know much about it. I'm learning as we go, which is stretching us. But the benefit for us and the USP, I would say, is we're coming at it with a little naivety. We have very experienced people within the company who know how to deliver events in that space, but we also have a big team behind them who are going to maybe come up with different ideas that haven't been done in that space before. Yeah. They're going to push things.
One of my prior guests on this podcast, Cindy Macklow, actually is an ad agency specialized in that space. So I'll hook you guys up because she does the ad side, and then maybe you guys do the event side of things. But that's exciting to be going into new industries. Yeah.
We don't want to rest on our laurels. We want to make sure that we're always delivering new, exciting experiences and events for people.
Is there something that you once thought, like 12 months ago, very firm conviction on that's completely changed today? We're like, I think about this completely differently now in hindsight.
In terms of events?
In terms of what you do. I'm always curious to see how people kind of shift their views on things because, at times we think something with very strong convictions around things and then we kind of rethink completely and have a different view on things.
I mean, our industry has had a tumultuous few years, should we say, with the pandemic going to no events through to being fully digital, being entirely virtual events.
When you pivoted there quite well, right? Because you had Zoom events.
We did a lot of virtual events, and there was definitely a moment where we were kind of going, well, we'll do this, but this is not what we like to do.
That's what we signed up for.
And I think the last year, I only really realized this recently, but I don't think I'd seen it, but there was a mini recession happening in the tech space. And it wasn't one that was necessarily playing out in terms of, the results that were being announced, but there was, you saw layoffs and you saw
budget cuts,
and you saw uncertainty. And I think we're coming out the back of that. And I think I had got into a zone where I thought from now on, events are going to have short timelines, and we're going to have to be more reactive, and we're not going to be able to plan further in the future.
Yeah.
And somehow in the last 2 months, it's all switched around. We're getting a lot more inquiries that are, longer lead times, a little bit more considered, which is great because,
you do more meaningful work, right?
I'm generally very positive about these things. I was beginning to feel a bit like, well, we're always going to have a fire drill and do something in 3 months that used to be 9 months.
That's interesting. I wonder what shift. I mean, I guess people are able to now be more intentional and plan for things if they know they have the budget for it.
Humans get used to their environment pretty well. And I think that the beginning of the year with the new administration and the uncertainty around, trade, people were just saying, well, let's wait. We're not ready to make long-term decisions. We're going to think about the next quarter rather than, forecasting too far ahead.
That's pretty typical.
People now know this is how it is now.
Yeah.
So
let's just do some events.
We'll put that to one side and we'll just keep going.
Yeah. No, that's great. What do you love doing the most? Because from the beginning of this conversation, you really kind of shared that, well, you've implied at least that you do what you really love to do and that other people aren't maybe, as lucky as that or haven't maybe found what they really love to do. What do you love doing the most? And how do you assess that regularly to be sure that you're still into it?
So in that horrible pandemic moment, I had that moment of thinking, well, my business might fail and we may end up having no business. And I realized that I hadn't thought about it enough, but my identity was very much tied to what I did, and it wasn't, and it was the business rather than me. And so I worked on my personal purpose statement.
What is it?
And so my personal purpose statement is bringing people and ideas together to form meaningful connections.
That's really good.
It was very much a Simon Sinek
I was going to say, I did the workshop. I haven't finished my personal statement yet.
For me, it's about
I love that.
Connecting
bringing people and ideas together.
Yeah, like bringing people together to form a connection is an amazing thing. Introducing an idea that they then go, oh, that's brilliant. And they then take it on, again, is something which just gives me joy. So it could be as simple as a dinner party with strangers there who get to meet and form bonds, or it could be going into a strategy workshop and maybe saying something which is they'd not thought of before, and then seeing that flourish with all the amazing work that they do on the back of it.
It's so meaningful to have done that work, though, to come to that statement, because it can really lead you to whatever you do next. It could be nearly in any industry, right? I mean, if you take that concept, you can do anything.
Within the company, it gives me the scope to be able to apply that in many different ways. I'm not an HR person, but I do like getting involved in people's development by saying to them, well, if you read this book or if you think about this idea, then maybe apply that to what you're thinking.
Yeah.
No,
amazing. I'm going to have to work on mine. That's going to be on my to-do list.
I've got
I did the first 2 sessions.
I can show you my one.
I'm going to need that and the slide with your values. So that's and the behaviors. So we're going to do that. To close out, what would you have loved to know, to have known 20 years ago? Like, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back in time? What would that message be?
I think it really is just about giving it a go and taking those risks. And I'm not saying I didn't take risks, but there were certainly a few decisions I didn't take that I regret.
What do you regret not doing?
Well, who knows how it would have played out. But when I was a chef, there was a moment where I considered, maybe I'll come and be a chef in New York for a bit.
So you always had the New York theme going.
There was a moment, yeah. And this is like 2006. I can't imagine.
Could have been not great timing 2 years later, but could have been great.
But as a chef, how much fun might I have had, and what connections would I have made? And
Gordon Ramsay and
well, maybe not. I don't regret things that didn't happen, but there were certainly different points where I was hesitant about pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
And that kind of idea of why not? Why not give it a go? Why not try it? And you know what? You can always go back.
Yeah.
So some life decisions are maybe slightly more permanent, but in your career, just trying everything out and giving it a go and
that's a good idea.
Taking those risks along the way, calculated ones, that fearlessly imaginative piece.
Yeah.
I think that's, for me, the reason why I managed to get where I got to was because I tried new things and pushed myself. But I probably could have done more of that.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming today. I could talk about this forever, so we might have to do a second podcast with you, but I really appreciate your time. To our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for listening in. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and we'll see you on the next episode of So Many Questions. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of So Many Questions, where curiosity meets leadership. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it with a colleague and subscribe to and rate So Many Questions on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. To learn more about host Rebecca Goodman-Stephens or law firm Moses Singer, visit mosessinger.com. Join us for a new episode when Rebecca sits down with another bold thinker and thought leader to explore what motivates and drives their leadership style and decisions. Until next time, stay curious.